What's up, folks? I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with a look at the post-Thanksgiving Week 12 main slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. 10 games on this slate, 6 in the early window, 4 in the late window, so a nice balanced slate this weekend for us to consider. And actually, unlike last week, we have more balanced games on tap. Last week, we had a ton of games with big spreads in betting markets. This week, they're all really close. I like to go through the biggest favorites on the board over the top of every video, and there's really only one this week. Isaiah Pacheco's Kansas City Chiefs are favored by 8.5 points on the road against the Las Vegas Raiders. It's going to make Pacheco himself, obviously, a great running back play once again here, given the expected positive game script. Pacheco is going to be facing a rush defense from the Raiders that is well below average against running backs both on the ground and through the air, and he's definitely going to lead Kansas City in the opportunities in the backfield once again here. He actually profiles as more of a tournament play because I do think the field is going to be on a handful of different running backs this week in low-risk contests. The most popular play, believe it or not, is probably going to be Colts running back Jonathan Taylor against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home. Indianapolis is favored by 2 points here at home as of Friday afternoon, and we've finally seen the takeover in this backfield for Jonathan Taylor with 18 and 23 carries in their last 2 games respectively. It's a tough matchup for Taylor here. The Buccaneers are actually in the top 10 defending the rush, and they're the best defense defending running backs in the passing game, but we know who Jonathan Taylor is. He's an above average player himself. The field is somewhat disregarding the difficulty of the matchup here, focused on the good spot for the Colts offense at home at Lucas Oil Stadium, and we can expect Jonathan Taylor to be featured heavily in a lot of lineups this weekend. The other side of that game, Rashad White still priced here at the low $6,000 range here on DraftKings. He is also going to be a top play in low risk contests, not just because of how many snaps he plays for Tampa Bay, but because of the touches in the passing game especially, where he has seen 6+ targets in 3 out of the last 5 games that he has played for the Buccaneers. A trailing game script here against the Colts is actually good news for Rashad White. Rashad White is going to be facing a rush defense that is also below average defending running backs, so he has that in his corner as well. I don't think there's really any problem with playing both running backs from this game in low-risk contest this week, because that is what the field is likely doing, so matching that is not a bad idea in low risk specifically. My favorite running back on this slate is actually going to be a player who's returning from injury. It's going to be Kiron Williams from the Los Angeles Rams. We saw Kiron get virtually every rep, play virtually every snap before he went on injured reserve for a few weeks, had the bye week, so it's been a while since we've seen him, but we saw the Rams actually release Darrell Henderson, bring him back to the practice squad. They still have Royce Freeman kicking around on the roster. There's really no reason Kiron isn't going to go right back into the role that he had before, and Sean McVay had some really positive comments in the media about Kiron this week in practice, calling him full go, expecting him to go back basically right to where he was before. I'm comfortable slotting him for the same workload that he had before the injury, and to me that makes him one of the top plays, not just in DFS, but in fantasy football in general this week at the running back position. 6,600 here on the road against the Arizona Cardinals, who are one of the worst defenses in the league against running backs, both through the ground and through the air. This is the big 3 running backs I'm trying to play this week: Kiron, Jonathan Taylor, and Rashad White. Do have another week here in low-risk contests where Trey McBride is going to be popular once again for the Arizona Cardinals. Had a somewhat disappointing result in the box score with just 9.3 fantasy points last week, but still 7 targets against the Houston Texans, still leading the Texans in opportunities in the passing game, and there's no reason to expect him not to do the same thing here in week number 12 against the Los Angeles Rams. Rams are the favorite side in that matchup, but Murray is going to be an interesting play in tournaments as well. McBride facing the second worst defense defending tight ends in fantasy football here. So to me, this is a pretty good low-risk core to use in your lineups on both DraftKings and FanDuel this week. Looking at the wide receiver position, coming off of their bye week, the New England Patriots are going to be back facing the New York Giants on the road. They are slightly favored. Their best receiver, the only receiver priced over the minimum price here on DraftKings, DeMario Douglas, also going to be a very popular play in low-risk contests this week. Douglas with 7+ targets in each of the last 3 games for the Patriots, and we expect him to be in that same role here after the week off against the New York Giants. Juju Smith-Schuster ran a ton of routes for New England last week, didn't necessarily get a ton of opportunities. Interesting that he's priced at the minimum price here. If that happens again, might be an interesting tournament play, but this is one of those low total games we probably want to avoid outside of DeMario Douglas here in low-risk contests. The Jaguars and the Houston Texans. This is going to be one of the most popular games on the board once again. We've seen Texans games be one of the better games to roster week in and week out in this recent stretch of NFL football. Trevor Lawrence is going to be one of the most popular plays that you can roster in low-risk contests. Also means that this game is in play for high-risk game stacking. I'll come back to exactly which quarterback we want to use in a second, because I do think in low-risk contests we're still treating quarterback as somewhat of a last man in decision. We're more focused on maximizing opportunities and touches at running back, wide receiver, and tight end before we make our quarterback decision. But if we have enough salary to get to Trevor Lawrence, he's one of the guys that should be at the top of your list in low risk contests this week. His receivers are where the field is going to be in low risk. Calvin Ridley is going to be pretty popular, but it does look like the slightly cheaper slot receiver, Christian Kirk, is actually going to be the most popular Jaguar wide receiver in low risk contests this week. So you want to make sure you get him into your lineups alongside DeMario Douglas. You see we have 5,200 per player remaining to finish off a low risk lineup here. Houston's Tank Dell is going to be the most popular wide receiver on this slate. That's what we're anticipating in the Occupy model, and that's what the industry is anticipating as well. 10 plus targets in each of the Texans' last 3 games. Ran the same number of routes last week as Nico Collins. Collins actually had more targets than Dell, even though he didn't have the better game than Dell. I would say that Collins here at $500 cheaper on DraftKings, definitely in play in low risk, but high risk contest as well. Game, once again, has the highest total in betting markets at 49 points. But for the sake of the argument and to show you where the field is going to be, use Tank Dell, $43.50 per player remaining. One of the things that I thought was interesting about the pricing this week is our salary floor at defense is now just $2,600, a little bit of an adjustment. So we don't have as much of a lever to pull on here for salary relief. One of the things the field is going to do this week, Kansas City, $3,100 favored on the road against the Raiders. This is going to be probably the most popular defense that you will see everybody play. The New England Patriots at $100 more here at $3,200, favored on the road against the Giants, are going to be an interesting defense that you can consider as well at their cost. At this same price point, though, our model actually likes the Denver Broncos in their matchup with the Cleveland Browns and rookie quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So I would say for tournaments, maybe low risk if you like this play and you want to tail the model, the Broncos would be another option that we are into here in week 12. I'll go and slot in the Chiefs just because that's where the field is likely to be this week. And you see we have 5,600 remaining for a quarterback that does take Trevor Lawrence out of play for this kind of build. So I will expect the field to be playing a quarterback that is in this $5,500 range or lower in low risk contests. And I do believe Gardner Minshew from the Indianapolis Colts ends up rising to the top of the pile as one of the more popular options, especially considering he has a pretty average matchup here with the Bucs defense being relatively league average against quarterbacks this year on the season. So Gardner Minshew at a really cheap $5,100, probably the punt quarterback people are considering in low risk contests. If you play him, that probably gives you enough salary to upgrade Christian Kirk from Calvin Ridley if that's the direction you like to go, or play a different defense. But this is pretty much where I do think the low risk builds are going to be here in week number 12, right around this neighborhood of plays. Kiron Williams may not be in the low-risk build. You may see the field opt to go with a double tight end build, similar to last week, maybe even arguably a little better than last week. Dalton Kincaid is playing the worst defense defending tight ends in the Philadelphia Eagles in another high total game there between Buffalo and Philadelphia. He's in line for a lot of work. Could be an interesting play for a double tight end lineup, but there's a couple of other tight ends that are going to be popular as well. Evan Engram pairs nicely with Trevor Lawrence, also an option. In fact, getting him in here does definitely give you enough salary to upgrade and do something else here with your low-risk lineups. So that's where the field is going to be here in week number 12. And in fact, looking at how this lineup is already shaking out, Christian Kirk, we have Tank Dell at wide receiver, just going with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback and getting Evan Engram at tight end into the lineup. There's a 3-1 with the Jaguars and the Texans. Highest total game on the board. You're definitely going to see the field be all over this spot in high-risk contests. I like it. I don't like it as much as some of the other spots that we have available. Really, the late game hammers here, the 2 best games on the board as far as what we're expecting from an entertainment standpoint, and then I think also from a fantasy standpoint. My favorite stacks this week are going to be Hurts's Eagles and Josh Allen's Buffalo Bills. I love both sides of this 4:25 p.m. matchup between the Bills and the Eagles. It's just a matter of finding the salary around these high upside plays to make it work. But Josh Allen with Dalton Kincaid in a really strong matchup. And then we have some options on the Eagles side with A.J. Brown off of a dud. Might be interesting to consider here in high risk. This is one of the stacks that I think is really interesting here in week number 12. Behind these guys, there is also Mahomes' Kansas City Chiefs looking to get off the schneid here after a couple of pretty bad losses against the Raiders. And one of the things that we can leverage with the Chiefs is that Justin Watson ran the most routes for this team at wide receiver last week. He's actually on our underperforming wide receiver list here in week number 12. Gives us a minimum price option that we can use to build some Mahomes double stacks with Travis Kelce that I think are kind of interesting. And then the run backs on the Raider side are always fairly obvious. We have Josh Jacobs with his extremely favorable role in fantasy football in this backfield with over 75% of team carries and over 9% of team targets. He's an option as a bring back. And then Devontae Adams is going to be a very highly ranked wide receiver in the Occupy model once again here in week number 12 and is still on our underperforming wide receiver list despite getting in the end zone against the Miami Dolphins in week number 11. So that is another vote for potentially going with this as a potential stack here. Only problem is it is kind of expensive with both Adams and Kelce, but pulling on that Justin Watson lever definitely makes it possible for you to get an interesting lineup together, stacking around the Chiefs and the Raiders in week number 12. Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray with his favorite tight end, Trey McBride. And then it does look like we just got news that Michael Wilson is going to be out again. So behind Glendale Brown here, Marquise, we're going to have the options of Rondale Moore and Greg Dortch, who both played a ton last week. We saw 8 targets for Dortch in that matchup against the Houston Texans. And then Rondale Moore with that first play of the game touchdown last week, going to play a bunch once again here also. So just extremely interesting value up and down for the Arizona Cardinals once again. You could go with Dortch, McBride, and my favorite running back in Kiron Williams. And there's a 3-1 that you can make work with a ton of salary left over on this slate. Lots of options to consider here in week number 12 in fantasy football. What do you guys think is a good play that you are considering this week? We're happy to answer any questions that you have in the comments section below. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel. That's how you get notified when we have more videos coming out for you every single week. Got NBA stuff going on every single day now. The guys have been crushing that since the season started. So you want to get notified when we're scheduling our live videos moving forward. We will be back with a video discussing Monday Night Football between the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings. Justin Fields and Josh Dobbs. What could be better to wrap up the week? Brian will have that for you on Monday. And then there will be a plug for Sunday Night Football between the Ravens and the Chargers, available on OccupyFantasy.com by about 4:30 in the afternoon on Sunday. Keep an eye out for any updates through the weekend. We will be updating our daily plug for week number 12's main slate for any injury news, any starting lineup changes that we get throughout the weekend. But as always, good luck in week number 12, and we'll be back next week to talk to you about week 13.